Why doesn't the USA use diesel-electric submarines? Diesel-electric submarines are not used by the US Navy for many reasons, but chief among them is this: they lack strategic mobility. Bounded by two great oceans, the US Navy has to be able to quickly deploy across the world in a rapid manner. Diesel-electric submarines simply can't do that. Diesel-electric subs have one trick up their sleeves: they are exceedingly difficult to find. However, they aren't invincible with this regard, and nuclear submarines aren't particularly easy to find, either. Even if a diesel-electric sub is harder to find than a nuke, if the diesel-electric sub can't find the nuke, it doesn't matter that he's quieter. Relative detectability isn't the issue. One has to be able to find the enemy as well as hide from him, and this is a matter of sensor capability and processing power. And usually, the advantage here goes to the nuke. When a diesel-electric sub finds a target, unless it's close or moving toward the sub has little chance of catching the target, because he also lacks tactical mobility. The diesel-electric sub is greatly limited in speed, and the faster he goes submerged, the more detectable he becomes. Therefore, they are most useful where the terrain channels the enemy into patrol areas small enough that the diesel-electric sub can manage while remaining slow and undetected. This means the littorals and a defensive posture. The US Navy doesn't need to defend littoral areas and has little reason to operate there offensively. If, at some time in the future, US Navy nuclear submarines become vulnerable to easy detection, the US Navy may need to consider alternatives. What were the primary missions of US submarines up through the 90s? The US Navy had two classes of submarines, designed specifically for those two missions. SSBN, Strategic Nuclear Deterrence. US SSBNs were, and still are, the only survivable second strike part of the nuclear triad: SSBNs, bombers, and ICBMs. ICBMs aren't going to survive a first strike, and bombers can't all be airborne, on alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They need to land and change crews, minimum, and they can't, mechanically, stay airborne very long, even with airborne refueling and flight multiple crews. Which is why USSR, Russia, UK, France, China and India also have, or are building, SSBNs. SSN. SSBN Hunter-Killer. That was the primary mission. Locate and trail opposition SSBNs. Once in trail, if that SSBN tries to launch missiles, blow them the hell out of the water. There were also many other missions, such as gathering intelligence and commando special operations. The second flight of 688 class SSNs included cruise missile VLS tubes, allowing a conventional land attack mission. None of those missions were suitable for a conventional submarine. The missions other nations used conventional submarines for were to protect coastal areas, littoral areas, and choke points. Until recently, the US had no need. When that changed, the Virginia class was designed with many features for littoral operations. Also, the first 4 Ohio-class SSBNs were modified for several missions, including massive conventional land attack and extensive commando special operations. At this point, there is no real need for a limited-endurance submarine, even of the AIP variety. That may change, especially if the mission becomes one to destroy enemy AIP submarines. The United States military primarily utilizes nuclear-powered submarines rather than diesel-electric submarines for several key reasons: endurance and range. Nuclear-powered submarines can stay submerged for extended periods, often for months at a time, without the need to surface for refueling. This provides significantly greater endurance and range compared to diesel-electric submarines, which are limited by their onboard fuel capacity and require periodic surfacing to recharge their batteries. Speed and maneuverability. Nuclear-powered submarines are generally faster and more maneuverable than their diesel-electric counterparts, which is important for strategic deterrence and combat operations. Weapon payload. The larger size and power generation capacity of nuclear-powered submarines allows them to carry a more extensive armament of torpedoes, cruise missiles, and other weapons compared to diesel-electric subs. Global reach. The ability to remain submerged for extended periods and cover vast distances without refueling enables nuclear-powered submarines to project power and conduct missions globally, which aligns with the United States' strategic interests and military objectives. Advanced quieting technologies. Nuclear-powered submarines can utilize more advanced acoustic silencing technologies to reduce their noise signature, making them harder to detect and track compared to diesel-electric submarines. While diesel-electric submarines have their own advantages, such as lower procurement and operating costs, the United States has prioritized the capabilities and strategic advantages offered by nuclear-powered submarines, which are better suited to supporting the country's naval power projection and global operational requirements. The best non-nuclear boats can be extremely effective in coastal waters or in restricted waters, but the limited range and sustained speed of non-nuclear boats greatly limits them in the open ocean or when operating far from a base. And therein lies the reason the USN doesn't have any. They simply don't have much of a coastal, restricted water defense mission, where a non-nuke would excel, but rather a constant blue water and far shore mission, with a bit of the other stuff thrown in. And for the little of that the USN does, the fancy nukes can certainly do it, even if they're overkill for the task. In other words, non-nuclear boats pretty much don't serve the needs of the missions the USN has. So they don't buy any. On the other hand, for someone like North Korea, whose big fear appears to be a US invasion, a coastal force is exactly what they need. An alternative to the use of diesel-electric and AIP submarines could be the wider adoption of maritime unmanned vehicles. The U.S. Navy is rapidly expanding its fleet of unmanned surface and underwater vehicles to meet emerging threats and change fleet warfare tactics. According to Reuters, the Navy aims to deploy thousands of low-cost autonomous vessels over the next 2 years as part of the Pentagon's Replicator initiative. Recent conflicts have demonstrated the effectiveness of naval drones. Ukraine has used explosive-laden speedboats to attack Russian warships in the Black Sea. Houthi rebels have targeted commercial and military vessels with drone boats in the Red Sea. Israel has deployed the 30-foot Protector to intercept enemy craft and protect its coastline. Ukraine has shown how effective they can be and how they can be employed in current operations, said Brian Clark, a former U.S. Navy officer and advisor on autonomous craft. The Navy needs to embrace that lesson and field combat sea drones right away. Sea drones offer several benefits for naval operations. Low cost, $2 to $3 million each, compared to manned vessels. Ability to operate in high-risk areas without endangering human crews. Diverse capabilities including intelligence gathering, mine sweeping, and infrastructure protection can act as a first line of defense for manned ships. The U.S. Navy is testing various drone models, including Ocean Aero's Triton, Sail Drone Surveyor and Explorer, and Huntington Ingalls Industries' Remus 300 underwater drone. Despite the potential, the Navy faces hurdles in rapidly deploying sea drones. Limited budget allocation, $172 million for small, medium drones in 2024. Reliance on U.S. or non-Chinese manufacturers in a Chinese-dominated market. Need for extensive testing and crew training. The U.S. Navy's push into unmanned naval vessels represents a significant shift in maritime strategy. As we've seen in recent drone technology developments, autonomous systems are becoming increasingly capable and cost-effective. The Navy's adoption of sea drones could provide a crucial advantage in potential conflicts, particularly in areas like the Taiwan Strait where China has been expanding its own unmanned capabilities. However, the success of this initiative will depend on overcoming budgetary constraints and rapidly scaling up production and deployment of these systems.